The rotation operator can be used to assign rotation to your particles, as you can imagine from the name. Now there are two ways that this rotation can actually be assigned. It can either be a static assignment of rotation, or it can actually be a dynamic assignment of rotation. And what I mean by static is the rotation is applied once when the particle enters the operator, and with a dynamic rotation assignment, the rotation value actually changes over time as something changes with a particle. Now, in this particular case, the rotation operator can actually pick up information from the direction of your particle, and therefore it can actually change the rotation to conform to that direction. So let's have a look at some of the parameters that we actually have in this operator. We have an orientation matrix, and this actually is the main part of the operator, I suppose, where you can actually choose which type of orientation of the particles that you actually want to go for, and these determine exactly how the rotation is defined. You have random 3D, which, as you can imagine, assigns a random rotation in 3D space, so useful for if you want totally randomized rotation. You have random horizontal, which limits that randomness just to the horizontal plane. So if you can imagine, the particle will only rotate on its vertical axis. You have world space. In this particular mode you have complete control over the actual rotation of the particle, and you can explicitly rotate it in any of the normal axes. You have speed space, and this is one of the two dynamic options. Although actually this is actually the only fully dynamic option. This is based partially on a dynamic value. But with speed space, the orientation of the particles actually is based on the direction that is traveling in at the time that the particle enters the operator. And with speed space follow, that is actually made dynamic. So as the direction of travel changes, the rotation of the particle will actually change to reflect that. So let's have a look at each of these in operation and see exactly what we get with them. If I choose random 3D and I scrub the timeline, you can see I've got some particles here and they're flying outwards towards a force here, a gravity force. This is just to give the particles some motion that actually changes over time. So you can see they actually start to orbit around this force and they travel back towards it. Now you can see in this case the rotation of the particles, I've actually made them into tetras, which have got a slightly different length on them using a scale operator here. You can see that the orientation of each particle is completely random, and that makes sense. It's just using a random 3D rotation assignment. Now in other choices you have control of the X, Y, Z, the divergence on these different axes, and then you can also control where that divergence takes place. And in this case we don't have any of those controls. It's just completely random. The only real control we have is the usual uniqueness parameter, where we can change the seed. And if I choose a different seed, you can see the orientation changes. So that's useful when you want to have just totally random rotations assigned. Now let's have a look at the next option, which is random horizontal. So in this case you can see that we have a random assignment, but it's actually only in the horizontal plane. So if I look at it from the side, you can see all the particles are actually they're aligned with the ground plane, if there was a ground plane. Now if I go back to random 3D, you can see that isn't the case. So you can see with random horizontal you actually restrict the rotation axis just to the Z axis. So if I actually scrub the timeline, you'll see they've all got a random horizontal assignment. But you'll also notice that that assignment doesn't change over time. They just stay completely oriented in the direction that they're actually oriented at the beginning of the timeline. So there's nothing dynamic about that particular option there. And one other thing you can do with this particular option is to put a little bit of divergence into the actual rotation. And if we choose divergence, this is, if I just put the value up to quite a high value here, we have a look, you can see that the divergence is actually still constrained just to the horizontal axis. So in this case all you're doing is you're just putting some variety on top of what is already a random value, so you're not really getting that much more out of it. But what you can actually do is you can actually change, you can see here, restrict divergence to axis. If I turn this off, you can see now that the particles have actually they've actually gone off the horizontal axis, and now it's acting a little bit more like